there, thrill seekers. That was a little bit of Kashmir by Led Zeppelin. And if any of you read my book Hardcore Zen, you'll know that there is something in the book Hardcore Zen about Kashmir by Led Zeppelin. And if you haven't read the book, then read the book, and then you'll know what there is about Kashmir by Led Zeppelin. Also, that's in Dad-Gad tuning for those of you who are guitarists out there who want to know the secret of how to play Kashmir by Led Zeppelin on one acoustic guitar. You can't play it unless you tune in Dad-Gad tuning. Secret. Now you learned something from this video channel. Never say you didn't learn anything from this video channel. Okay, so for today's video, I thought I would talk about a little bit of how Buddhism works. And what I mean by that is how Buddhism works sort of on the ground when you're trying to kind of do Buddhism. And there's all this kind of political stuff. Political, not meaning exactly political in the sense of Republicans and Democrats or conservatives and liberals and all that stuff, but this sort of like, political stuff where you have to deal with people and their opinions and how people want to... Anyway, let me just tell you the story. So, here's the story. This year, my book, Don't Be a Jerk, is going to be published in French under the title Comprendre Dogen, which I think translates to something like Understanding Dogen. So they're publishing it with a little bit of a different angle in France as almost... I don't know. I guess they're promoting it as more of a standard sort of Buddhist book. So the cover is more sort of what you expect from a Buddhist book rather than the kind of cartoony cover that they put on it in America, which the cover that they put on it in America, I didn't draw that cover, but it was suggested by me. I kind of described what I wanted to the artist, and he did it. Johnny Krapp is a guy from, actually a French-Canadian guy in Quebec, in Canada, who did it. And but they're not using that cover. They're using more of a straight cover. But here's what's going on is there's a magazine in France, a Buddhist sort of magazine, sort of the Buddhist equivalent of, or sort of the French equivalent, excuse me, of like Tricycle magazine in the US, who they're apparently a little reluctant to review the book or to publish anything about the book or to do any interviews with me or whatever, because there's some organization in France of Soto Zen Buddhists who apparently, objected to my take on emptiness, which appeared in an earlier issue of that French Buddhist magazine in, I don't know, a couple of years ago. And it was an excerpt from this book, Letters to a Dead Friend About Zen, which came out in French under a title something like Punk Zen or Zen Punk or something like that. If I can find a copy of the book and put it up here on screen, I will. If you're not seeing the book in French on screen, it means I couldn't find my copy of the book in French and I didn't put it up there. Anyway, but it's from this book, Letters to a Dead Friend About Zen. And I was asked by the French publishers if I would write something to this group to explain my take on emptiness. And I don't know if I can explain my take on emptiness really, but what I thought I would do with this video as a kind of preliminary to it is just read you guys my take on emptiness, because it's only 3.5 pages. 3.5 pages. So it's pretty short, and I think I can get through it in the time allotted to this video with some time to talk about this and maybe say some things afterwards. So here it is. And if you know anything about this book, it is formatted as if it's a series of letters to my dead friend who I'm calling Marky in the book. It's based on an actual friend of mine who died, And he'd been a friend of mine. His real name isn't Marky, and that's addressed in the book, in the end of the book. But he was a friend of mine since high school. You know, we'd been friends since the two of us. I was a bit older than him, so I was maybe 15 and he was 14, something like that, when we first met. We shared a house together. We played in bands. We never played in the same band together, but our two bands shared stages often, so we were part of that sort of punk rock scene together. We'd hung out a lot together, knew each other pretty well, but I'd never really talked to him about my Zen stuff, which has a lot to do with life and death and stuff. And when Marky, who I'll call him Marky for the sake of this video, was dying, I went up to see him a couple of times and spent, several days with him on two or maybe I think it was 3 different occasions after he'd gotten his diagnosis and he knew that he was terminally ill. And even during those times, we never really talked about the sort of Zen and spiritual stuff that I was into in any real depth, because I didn't want to be that guy, especially to a person who was dying. I didn't want to be that guy who's like trying to push my religion on my friend. I just wanted to be there to support him and to be with him in his hour of need, and I didn't want to push religious stuff on him. But a few years later, contemplating that whole thing that had gone down, I decided I'd put all the things that I would have said to him if opportunity had arose to say that to him in this series of letters to a dead friend about Zen, in the hopes that maybe living people might benefit from it. Because I think a lot of people who, like him, like Marky in the book, might be able to appreciate a lot of this stuff that they wouldn't necessarily know they would be able to appreciate. Because to a person like Marky, to the person like my friend, he would never have been interested in something like Zen, because it was just kind of like not the kind of thing he'd be into. He's just kind of one of those people. He's a punk rock guy. He liked other things, and it wouldn't have occurred to him to become interested in this sort of thing, in Zen. So that's the basis of the book. Okay, so now that we got that out of the way, let me just read to you my letter to my friend Marky about emptiness, and then maybe we can figure out together what could possibly have offended these Soto Zen Buddhists in France about my take on emptiness. Like, what could be offensive about this? Maybe you can tell me in the comments what's offensive about this. Okay. Dear Marky, I made it to the retreat center I mentioned in my last letter. This is written as if I'm traveling through Europe doing all these things, and I'm writing him these letters as I'm traveling through Europe. It's called Benedictushof, and it's a little ways outside a city called Würzburg. It's a stately old Benedictine monastery surrounded by miles of rolling hills and lush forests. About 30 people from all parts of Germany have gathered here to sit and stare at the walls with me for the next 5 days. Since mentioning emptiness in my last letter to you, I've been thinking a lot about it. Just before I headed off to this retreat center, I was in a German shop that specialized in science fiction stuff, books, comics, DVDs, toys, and so on. There I found a special German double-disc edition DVD of my personal favorite Godzilla movie, the one that used to be known in the US as Monster Zero, or sometimes Godzilla vs. Monster Zero. This would have been a movie that Marky, my friend, would have been very familiar with. I think we even watched it together. The currently available DVD edition in the US is entitled Invasion of Astro Monster, for reasons that are far too nerdy to go into here. The German double DVD version has a bunch of extras available only in Germany, and I'm a geek, so I bought it. The movie was originally called Kaiju Daisenso, which translates to The Great Monster War. When it was first released in Germany, it was retitled Befehl aus dem Dunkel, or Command from the Darkness. The German title actually comes from a novel by Hans Dominick, who was sort of a German Jules Verne or H.G. Wells type. a guy who wrote science fiction in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, well before science fiction became a big thing. Apparently, the German film company that had the rights to distribute Monster Zero had also paid for the option to make a film based on Dominic's novel. Rather than actually making that film, they just slapped the novel's title on a Godzilla movie that they imported from Japan. Anyway, I like that title. It's very evocative. The first person I asked mistakenly translated it as Message from the Darkness, which is even better. A message, a communication from that which is unknown, perhaps even unknowable. In Zen, we often talk about emptiness, but we could use other words. St. John of the Cross wrote about what he called unknowing, which is in many ways analogous to the Zen idea of emptiness. Lately, I've been talking about silence rather than emptiness. That word works better for me. We could refer to the same idea by calling it darkness, in which case much of Zen Buddhist philosophy is a message from the darkness. When we talk about emptiness in the Zen sense, we're trying to indicate the area of life, the universe, and everything that we cannot express in words. And that reference to life, the universe, and everything is a reference to the book Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which would have been a book that Marky would have been quite familiar with. Another thing we had in common. There's a recent scientific theory that emptiness gave rise to the universe of form. The idea of the Big Bang has been widely accepted for decades now, but nobody can explain where that tiny little ball of stuff that exploded into the universe as we know it came from. Now some theoretical physicists are saying that maybe emptiness itself gave rise to the whole phenomenal universe. Lawrence Krauss wrote a book about this called A Universe from Nothing. These physicists need only a little more coaxing to make the leap that the Buddhists made 1,000 years ago, that what we know as form didn't just derive from emptiness, it is emptiness. One of the manifestations of absolute nothing is this world, is you and me. Silence, or emptiness, is the most powerful thing there can be. Nothing can ever harm it because it is nothing. Nothing can escape it. Silence underlies everything. Silence is the basis of all sound. It's there even in the loudest place there is. Emptiness is the basis of all form. Emptiness is what allows form to be form. Form is what allows emptiness to be emptiness. Darkness, or silence, or emptiness is the unimaginable. It's beyond our ability to comprehend. In a transcribed talk that can be found in a book called Embracing Emptiness, Kobun Chino Roshi talked about what he called holy silence. He said, "Holy silence is the space where your psyche can be totally free, without hindrance. It's like clean air with no dust. Mind is captured by matter, but when matter is not there, the mind recovers its nature, which is time and space itself. It is not just the concept of space, but actual space, actual time, without ignorance. The silence that many of us fear is the basis of ourselves and of everything and everything else there ever was, will be, could be, or isn't. It is the ground of all being and non-being. There is no reason to fear complete non-existence. Complete non-existence is what you are made from. Form is emptiness. Emptiness is form." That's a quote from the Heart Sutra, a very standard foundational Zen text. This is a message from the darkness that is me to the darkness that is you. It's a message from that part of ourselves that is darkness, that is silence, that is the unknown and unknowable. But rather than being a message from aliens contacting us from the darkness of outer space and asking us to lend us them Godzilla, which is what happens in the movie Monster Zero, it is ourselves telling ourselves that there is nothing to fear, nothing to run from, nothing to cling to, nothing to fight for or against. That which terrifies us more than anything else is just ourselves, our infinite and non-existent selves. We are all silence. We are all nothing. We are, all of us, the ground of all being and non-being. And if that's so, what sense does it make for one aspect of nothing to fight with another aspect of nothing over how much nothing each aspect possesses? Especially when we all possess nothing, which is the same as saying we all possess everything. As you can tell, I've been doing far too much staring at walls over the past few weeks. It makes loony ideas like this start to make sense. And not just make sense, it starts to make them the only ideas that make sense. The conventional ways of looking at things start to seem like a kind of sustained madness. Another way to understand the Buddhist concept of emptiness is, I think, a little simpler. We cannot understand the final truth of things, since all our concepts are just approximations of reality, even the really detailed scientific concepts. Given that, maybe it's good to relax a little in our attempts at understanding things and instead understand everything as emptiness. This doesn't mean everything is an insubstantial void. It just means our ideas about things are all fundamentally mistaken and therefore fundamentally empty. That didn't take as long to explain as I thought it would. I wish I could get letters back from you to see if I'm making any sense here, but since I can't, I'll just have to keep pressing on. Don't forget to wash behind your ears, Brad. Okay, so that's it. That's my take on emptiness. Reading it back, I don't know, maybe they're upset because I said loony ideas. I mean, I think that's obviously being ironic. I obviously don't think these ideas are loony. I spent 30 years of my life studying and working with them. I'm saying loony because I think that my reader, Marky, my potential reader, might see them as loony. And I'm kind of, being self-effacing there. Maybe they're upset because I'm comparing these lofty Zen ideas to Godzilla. I don't know. There is another theory that maybe it's not really my take on emptiness they're upset about at all, but maybe they're kind of worried that they're seeing this book as kind of competition for the stuff that they want to put out, and maybe that's what they're really upset about, and they don't want their position to be rattled at all in the world of Zen. There's a lot of this kind of territorial stuff I've seen go on, where people kind of stake out their little territories because maybe they're the only game in town, and they're the only ones doing Zen Buddhism in whatever geographical area they happen to be in. And because of that, they're very used to not having to answer a lot of questions. They're just, they just make their pronouncements and everybody listens. And so if somebody else comes along, then they have to kind of deal with that. And maybe they don't want to deal with somebody like me. That could be one of the problems. I don't really know. But what I'm going to do when addressing this particular issue is I'm just going to address it as if what they're saying is honest, So I'm going to address it as if what they're saying is really true, that what they're really upset about is my take on emptiness. So maybe you guys in the comments section can help me out and tell me what could possibly be offensive about my take on emptiness. So there you go. So if you want to help me out, put a comment in the comments section, or you can write to me at bw@hardcorezen.info. By the way, my email address is always at the end of every video, and you can always write to me there. So that's always nice to hear from people. So if you want to support me financially, you can go to the URL that you're seeing on the screen below, which is hardcorezen.info/donate. That is hardcorezen.info/donate. There you can find links to my PayPal and my Patreon accounts. Those are my main and usually only ways of making a living, so I appreciate your support. But as always, you don't gotta support me if you don't want to support me. We will see you next time. Have a good time all the time. I'm going to show you some video I shot of Ziggy at a dog park last week. Maybe it's a little bit better than more video of Ziggy sleeping on the couch like I usually have. So we'll see you next time. Have a good time all the time. I think I said that anyway. Bye.
Hey, sweetie pie. Good boy. Hey.